Welcome to video 6 in my series Antidote to Tyranny. This is my first addendum. I thought video 5 would be my conclusion and the last video in this series, at least for a while, but it seems the Zodiac had other plans for me. I never really thought my life would be written in or controlled by the stars. Whilst recording my conclusion video, I stumbled into the Sistine Chapel. Allegedly, Michelangelo spent several years on his back painting the ceiling from 1508 to 1512, although there was a period in the middle where no work was done at all. In 1990, an American doctor, Frank Lynn Meshberger, published a comparative observation showing that the cloak around God formed a representation of the human brain. This detail seemed to have gone unnoticed by the Vatican for over 480 years. It also turns out that there are at least another 4 representations of brains of different species in the ceiling painting, along with other anatomical references. So what else is hidden in the ceiling? Well, I'm only going to look at the creation of Adam section. Initially, you may think there is nothing to see, but the Vatican didn't spot the brains of this artistry. So what else is here? There are 4 main elements to this section. We have the background. You see it as the sky. Then there is the land, the only bit of land in this section. Not that there's much space for anything else. It might also seem like a flat top hill, a riverbank, or maybe a bit of coastline to you. Adam is then reclining on the land. And finally, we have God, not on a cloud, but in a red cloak or blanket or even rug, along with cherubs or high-ranking angels. Is the sky representative of truth and wisdom? It's light blue. If there was no light, it would be black. And surely if we have light, we become enlightened and knowledgeable. We can see the truth that was once hidden in darkness. I know you're going to call me mad again, but I remind you that it is a fine line between genius and insanity. But I actually think I can identify that speck of land where Adam reclines, and that blue sky is in fact water, very sacred water, or even holy water. In fact, it is the flow of cosmic consciousness, wisdom, inspiration, and spirit. It is spiritual water. It was Adam who brought me here. In my thinking, during the production of video 5, or rather it was Gemini that brought me here. Is our sleeping babe of the landscape really Adam, awaiting God's inspirational life force or Holy Spirit or wisdom of knowledge to be injected into him? So is God floating, not in the sky above, but in a coracle, in the conscious water of spirit, wisdom and inspiration? Graham K. Griffiths had hoped to identify Catherine Maltwood's Glastonbury Zodiac symbols within the English and Welsh coastlines, and I don't expect that he thought it would take up the entire coastline from south of the River Tees on the east coast right around to where the River Eden flows into the Irish Sea on the west coast of England. His discovery of Scorpio across the Irish Sea must have both devastated and delighted him. My approach to the Albion Zodiac is from an entirely different angle and comes with newly acquired 2020 vision and 2020 thinking. And my task is to identify the entire coastline that Graham discarded or ignored as it didn't meet his criteria or expectations. In video 5, I showed that the Isle of Mann was centrally placed in the 14 so far identified symbols of the Albion Zodiac, and so the Isle of Mann has been on my mind for some time, and I'm sure Graham was fully aware of its awkward position between Scorpio and the rest of his zodiacal figures. So let's place the Isle of Mann in our zodiac. Interestingly, when defining the arc of Cancer, Graham used the lighthouse on the south of the Isle of Mann as the reference point to draw the top of the sail after finding a straight line of the D estuary hit that point perfectly. He then went on to use other points of light to help define the stern of the arc. In my conclusion video, I also talked about Ceridwen's cauldron of inspiration and Arthur's quest to the underworld in search of it. After I finished that video and published it, and as if right on cue in what might have seemed yet another astronomical coincidence, Hugh Evans released his video on Awen. Awen is interesting as a constellation as it represents a concept. Hugh's videos and publications explore the origins of numbers and the zodiac, and their links to the Welsh language and the landscape of Gwynedd. This becomes an absolutely fascinating insight into the Welsh language and how the words themselves are built on descriptive meanings rather than an abstract concept or of an unknown origin, as seems to happen a lot with many words from other European languages. I guess the insular and isolation from external influences on their society and language is not unique, but the Welsh certainly seem one of the oldest and largest nations to have avoided these external forces and to be assimilated. In Hugh's Glastonbury presentation, he explains how the landscape helped preserve their language, which is also said to be older than Hebrew and possibly linked to the spoken language of the Egyptian hieroglyphs. So when I looked at the Isle of Mann, which I actually hadn't intended to do whilst producing my last video, but the stars seemed to lead me there, I saw the celestial cloud of the Sistine Chapel and God's outstretched arm anointing Adam with that spark of life. It was Gemini that initially drew my attention to Michelangelo's depiction, but did you see Taurus in his painting? No? I know many do not see things that I see, and it has been said by someone I know that I see things that aren't there. Presumably he was referring to windows underground in mud-flooded buildings, or it could have been Virgo in the Welsh landscape and the snake crown of Holyhead. So let me show you what I saw and you tell me it's not there or you can't see it. Firstly, we need to understand the perspective of the image. We're not looking vertically down or up, as we see both Adam and God as side on and from slightly above, slightly raised viewpoint. We can deduce from the shadows on the figures, assuming we are in the north of the equator, especially as this picture is in Italy, or technically it's in the Vatican State City, which isn't technically Italy, but it's on the landmass of Italy. We are facing generally north as the light is behind us, and probably late or late afternoon, early evening, as the shadows cast towards the bottom right corner of the image. So let me show you where I believe we are, as I see a very familiar bit of coastline. Remember, I've lived, breathed and eaten nothing but the coastline for about 9 months now, and I am very used to seeing things in a different way or from a different perspective, and this has been the case since a very young age with me. But doesn't Michelangelo's land look like our bull's withers or a point of hair? And here is the point of air, the bend in the coastline on the northeast coast of Wales that goes from Prestatyn down to into the Dee estuary, where we find Flint and Deeside. But you're going to say it looks nothing like it, and that's because we are comparing it from the wrong perspective. So let's change our perspective slightly, and we can see that now our landscape seems to look a lot like the land where Adam sits. On the land we have the reclining or limp and lifeless Adam, and how similar it is to our sleeping babe Gemini, although I'll have to flip him and rotate him slightly. I know you are going to still say it's nothing like it, but to me, Adam is our infant Gemini, and I would never have seen Taurus in the landscape of this picture had it not been my own mind linking the shape of Gemini to the shape of Adam in the creation of Adam. So let's place Gemini on Taurus's back. And if Gemini is now upon the back of the bull, then we would have removed his arm that forms the other side of the Dee estuary, which gives us space to place God. And just before we get there, I did see another picture showing Adam as a human heart. So we have the cloud of heavenly host, and as many now accept, this is a representation of the human brain. God resides here, in this depiction at least. God is reaching out to deliver that spark of life, that inspiration of knowledge, to awaken or jumpstart Adam's heart and animate him into life. Although Adam doesn't seem that lifeless, just tired. His muscles clearly seem well toned, so maybe he's just woken from an afternoon nap on the side of the River Dee. You see the simile? Gemini is sleeping on the side of the River Dee, and if this landscape is the point of air, then Adam has been sleeping on the bank of the River Dee too. As with God, the brain is also where we reside. In Douglas Adams' Dirk Gently series of books, Dirk's sister falls into another dimension and finds the well of everything. The wise sorceress starts talking directly to her brain rather than her body. After all, our body is merely a tool of our mind, or should I say our spirit or soul. And like our thoughts, these seem to have no significant physical weight. How strange then, by verbalizing our thoughts, we can give weight to an argument. Not that arguments have physical weight either, or at least not until the actions of the body make physical contact with the other body. And Is Douglas Adams' well of everything the same as Ceridwen's cauldron of inspiration, or even the well of knowledge associated with our salmon? And as Dirk Gently thinks that everything is holistically connected, I now find myself following Douglas Adams' thoughts, and surely even his Hitchhiker's series draws the same conclusion. Michelangelo, allegedly, painted 5 different brains on the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel, all from different species. This knowledge would probably have been seen as heresy at the time. According to our Romanized history, as was the painting of Adam with a navel, maybe this caused the dispute that halted the painting midway through. So what has a brain got to do with the stars? And shouldn't I be looking for a constellation rather than a brain floating in the Irish Sea? Well, once again, Hugh Evans and the Landscape of Wales has given us the answer in his timely video release, Awen, as shared in my community pages on YouTube, shows us Awen appears in the constellation of Cassiopeia, which forms a cauldron in the landscape. But what is the concept of Awen? Hugh explains that in Welsh it means inspiration, spirit, or even spark of life. Interestingly, it is a zigzag, like a flash of lightning, like a spark. And it's within Cassiopeia, which is Don's cauldron. Don is also known as Ceridwen. So the constellation of Cassiopeia is Ceridwen's cauldron of inspiration, as mentioned in video 5. And once again, the story of Arthur is tied back to the constellations and written in the landscape of the British Isles. Let's look in a little more detail at where God sits. Although we have the shape of the brain, and oh boy, does the landscape of the Isle of Mann topographically resemble that brain. The red cloak he sits in seems to be a cut-through skull on its side. So is this red rug now a bowl or a pot that holds God and his choir, a choir being the collective name for a group of angels? And I must thank you once more. He'll be asking for commission soon, so make sure you go to his channel and subscribe and watch his videos. So a choir is a group of angels, and the red robe that Michelangelo has painted appears to represent the inside of a skull. And I thought, if he's floating down the Dee estuary, might we say that he is in fact in a coracle, being a traditional Welsh fishing boat, and traditionally made from an animal hide or a material, sometimes waterproof with bitumen or tar. So I asked Hugh about the meaning of coracle, to which he answered, the core means circle, as to enclose or cover, and the suffix, the oracle as it were, could find a root in the Welsh that means a cloak or material, which means that the coracle literally means a material enclosing or forming a small circle, which is the small fishing boat is exactly what it is. It's the material encloses or forms a circle around a wooden frame. However, there are also other variations on the meaning. The core can also mean choir, and the covering can also be a rug or a cloak or material, or it's the covering. So coracle can be a covered or a cloaked choir of angels, which is what God is sitting in. The half skull could almost be a bowl, if we look at it like that, rather than the covered choir, but might be likened to a cooking pot or a cauldron. The word cauldron, or its Welsh equivalent, can be associated with a starting point and a furnace. And isn't that what our lightning is? Isn't that the starting point of the fire? The spark of inspiration? The Awen now literally becomes associated with the cauldron as well as within the landscape. See Hugh's video on this for more details. So now we're building up some really strong links here that continually tie all our constellations and the stories together, both the mythological world and the physical visual world around us. But it's all coming together through the Welsh language too. At this point, I'd like to remind you of my thoughts for why we have these landscape zodiacs littered around the landscape. There's possibly 60 or more landscape zodiacs, and we are working on trying to get a definitive list of these 60 zodiacs. If we believe our spirit or soul or consciousness lives on after our physical being has become redundant in our journey, then we might believe that it lives on in the heavens above us, as many past civilizations appear to have believed. Then we might consider that these landscape zodiacs are a journey for our conscious mind, but in the realms of the physical, a place where both our body and soul can journey together in harmony. Many pilgrims involve travelling between points, usually churches, although standing stones and ley lines seem to help guide their path too. Both in Hugh Evans' star map and Kate Preston's La Mancha zodiac, which my path has been guided to, both churches and standing stones mark the point of the star maps out on the ground that we walk. Hugh points out, as I also recall my education suggested, that churches often stand on previous points of religious significance, or even long forgotten stone circles and standing stones. So if you see a standing stone within the grounds of a church and have never wondered why a pagan symbol might be there, it might be because they removed or built over the other stones that formed the circle. Whilst travelling around the face of the Cumbrian deity on the cross, we stopped at Long Meg and her daughter's stone circle. Meg stood tall and proud, but outside of the circle, as if overseeing the proceedings within the ring, almost as a druid watching over the Celts' dance of life. Back to the Welsh star map landscape, and Hugh's video on Awen shows the spirit of wisdom or life flowing from Don's cauldron into the sacred River Dee. Ceridwen is a more recent name for Don. Don in the Welsh language has a root in the meaning of flow or wave. So Don's cauldron now could become a melting pot that's floating or flowing in the waves. And if we interchange cauldron with coracle, we have a boat in the waves of the flowing River Dee. That's right, the River Dee that flows down the Dee estuary, as identified in the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel. So now we find God in heaven is literally floating in a coracle on the flow of wisdom and life in or heading for the Irish Sea. And remember that Dee estuary points straight at the Isle of Mann. And all of this is depicted on the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel in the Vatican. Well, you either believe my links or think they have some merit, but in my mind, this really shows the significance of the Albion Zodiac in everything, everywhere. And not only does the Isle of Mann visually look like the Sistine Chapel with God's outstretched arm in line with the southwest peninsula, but in the Sistine Chapel, the hand of Adam is in the position of an island just off the Isle of Mann called the Calf of Mann. In rocks and landscape features, a calf is not in reference to a leg muscle, but is the smaller feature near a large feature as a child of the larger feature. A calf is not only associated with a child or a baby, but can also mean a birth and a pregnancy. This is best demonstrated in the bovine world. If a cow is pregnant, she is said to be in calf. When she gives birth, she is said to be calving. And when the baby arrives, it is known as a calf. This is also the same in many other animal species. So, the Calf of Mann is literally the birth or creation of man, at least in name, and metaphorically, the island is the calf of the Isle of Mann and has been created by the Isle of Mann. The Sistine Chapel panel is known as the creation of Adam, or creation of man sometimes. Man, or Adam, has been created in God's image. Adam is therefore the calf of God. So these are yet more amazing coincidences of the Albion Zodiac. So the constellation of Cassiopeia is the Awen that flows from Don's Cauldron in Hugh's Gwyneth's star map landscape, and this flow is graphically represented as a creative, inspirational flow of life, spirit, and everything that resides within the human brain, and painted for all to see upon the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel in the Vatican, as well as written in the landscape of the British Isles. From Greek mythology standpoint, the calf of Cassiopeia would be Andromeda, the one that Perseus saved from Cetus with the severed head of Medusa, although technically Andromeda is another constellation, so maybe we'll find her in the landscape of Scotland. Who knows? The celestial position of Cassiopeia is close to the celestial pole as viewed above Albion. That is to say, it's towards the centre of the zodiac as viewed from the British Isles, and a constant feature of the night sky. And here too, with the Isle of Mann, it's found in the middle of our landscape zodiac. It's roughly very close to the midpoint, our celestial centre, our celestial pole, as it were, within our Albion zodiac. So now I have tied the Isle of Mann to the constellation of Cassiopeia, the Arthurian legend, Greek mythology, and the count of identifiable constellations has risen to 15 within the Albion Zodiac. And a quick glance at my Google Maps shows me that I have identified a possible star fort site on the Calf of Mann too, being 10.5 kilometres from Castle Rushen in Castletown on the Isle of Mann. And there you go. I hope you've enjoyed my addendum to the Antidote to Tyranny series. Don't forget to find out more about the constellations and the Welsh connections on Hugh's channel. And please don't forget to like and share these videos, and one day YouTube might even pay me for the time and effort in bringing these productions to you. The content of these videos is my personal view of the world around us, in which we find a strong and sturdy repository of myths, legends, and celestial knowledge. I hope to bring you some more of these 60 landscape zodiacs we have somewhere soon, and even discoveries of associated constellations within the landscape of Scotland in the very near future. And I will, of course, be continually guided by the stars and constellations in the landscape of the Albion Zodiac. Thank you.